Beep, 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 beep. Hey up, good people of the YouTubes. How are we this morning? Welcome to the Court of the EDI Jester. Look at my hair this morning. What's going on with me? Messy man. Give me a cup of tea in my hair. It's early. It's early, but I'm filming for the lunchtime special. So I can stick it in the one that I filmed earlier, after the one I did. This is good. Every now and again, something comes up that I think's more important than the usual. And so this short lunchtime special is one of those. It's more important than the usual because I think we've now got another book to add to the growing list of superb reading material in regards to understanding exactly what's going on with this insane gender and queer theory nonsense. So I'm very pleased to see that it has come from an organisation, some of whose members and supporters are warrior teachers. So this is close. Okay, it's close. So without further ado, I bring to you a new book from Pitt, P-I-T-T. Now, for those of you unfamiliar with Pitt, you can find them online and you can find them on the old Twitters. And we now have a new book from Parents with Inconvenient Truths about Trans. That's what Pitt stands for. It's called Parents with Inconvenient Truths About Trans, Tales from the Home Front in the Fight to Save Our Kids. Having known some of these parents, I can assure you that their tales, their story, is an important one. Is worth engaging with if we are to understand the phenomenon fully and to understand what the effects of these ridiculous theories are on parents and children and their relationships, as well as on the societal front. So I recommend this book. I will put a link in the Dubris for you, and I'll read you a little bit of an article that I'm also going to include, which was written by Matt Osborne. And it talks about some of the successes that these parents have had, these parents at Pitt have had in freeing their children and their loved ones from the gender woo-woo, right? Which is what we're all game for. We're all about that. There are three types of people that are threatening and therefore absolutely intolerable to the trans ideology narrative, writes Josie A. and Dinah S. in the new book, Parents with Inconvenient Truth About Trans, Tales from the Home Front in the Fight to Save Our Kids. Most inconvenient to the trans narrative are desisters, people who thought they were trans but then stopped thinking that way. Detransitioners, people who transition to the other sex and now reverting back. It's not to say they can, it's just illustrating the point. And parents who question. They write, there's the big three for them. We are two mums whose lives were irrevocably altered by our own personal brushes with gender ideology. Josie A. and Dinah S. must remain anonymous. We are scared that you will take away our kids, dox us, and destroy our livelihoods, and much more importantly, our families. Think we're being overly dramatic? Just ask anyone who's dared to publicly question trans ideology. Nevertheless, they persist in their quiet suffering, often with success, exhibiting the sort of parental skills that used to fall under the rubric of tough love once upon a time in North America. When a parent experiences the sudden onset of gender dysphoria in a child with no prior signs of gender nonconformity, these are in speech marks, scales fall from their eyes. Like the character George Nada, played by Roddy Piper in the 1988 sci-fi classic They Live, these parents come to see the whole world through new lenses. As our so-called liberal societies become increasingly illiberal, anti-free speech and anti-family, the impact on their lives has been unstudied, censored, their experiences devalued as hate. Parents have been silenced for years, emotionally blackmailed and held hostage by threats to take away our kids, and that today's narrative of trans as a biological fact has gone unquestioned and has been permitted to run amok with unfettered access to our schools, government and media for far too long. They write. The mental strain can be overwhelming, even to the point of contemplating self-harm or suicide. Ironically, the same threat often employed by kids if their parents do not go along with their newfound identity. But devoted parental love is a difficult fire to extinguish. Josie and Dinah joined underground online support groups of parents in their situation. They soon realised there was a pattern to what they were going through. First, parents would support their children and seek the best professional help they could find. But then they would begin to research the topic in greater depth, reading more and more until it dawned on them, sooner or later, that the support base for the child's sterilising affirmation regime is incredibly weak. Not only were their kids caught up in a bizarre new form of magical thinking, so were members of their families, communities, clergies, school boards, governments and child protection agencies. The long march of gender ideology through all institutions had taken place under the radar. Now they found themselves ostracised, unemployed, even potentially jailed for refusing to participate in the cult. Their love was pronounced abuse. But parental love is hard to kill. They called themselves trans-educated rational parents, or TERPs, at first. It was a pun on TERFs, or trans-exclusionary radical feminists, that transgender advocacy originally blamed for all that dangerous transphobia that supposedly exists in the universe. A new cohort joined the growing global underground resistance to gender identity ideology, that being the pit parents. Similar to the revolution that occurred on Mumsnet in the United Kingdom, it was furtive at first. Code names, secret messages passed in the dark, covert operations, hiding from the authorities. Are we talking about 1944 in Europe? Sadly, no. We're talking about the present day, and our secret resistance is taking place all over the world, writes another anonymous parent in the book. As we wrote, our floodgates burst, Josie and Dinah explain. We had so many stories to tell, and we realised how important it was for other parents that we collect these stories and make them available on a single platform, because mainstream media and news organisations were entirely unwilling to do anything other than promote a trans activist agenda. Sharing their experiences as parents with inconvenient truths about trans, the anguished families they had come to know through this internet underground began to find their voices and their courage. Many have lost contact with children at the age of majority. Others are still terrified that their children will follow an unhealthy path when they leave for college. But there were parents who, against the odds, often against the ideological advice of family and licensed therapists and medical professionals and teachers displaying total ideological capture, ever so gently clawed their children back from the edge. And here's a quote. With the passage of time and the transmission of this hard-won knowledge, we found that many of our children also began to desist and no longer identified as transgender. This further accelerated and amplified the cycle Pitt had created, as parents of these children spread their stories in the hope of desistance to other parents who, for so long, had been brainwashed into believing that trans was a permanent state of being and that desistance and detransition were mythical. It is the worst nightmare of the activists, parents who compassionately guide their children to a healthy adulthood and life without carcinogenic cross-sex hormones or life-altering surgeries. In the twisted, inverse, deranging logic of the transgender cult, this is conversion therapy of trans kids and a supposed civil rights crime. You and I know, of course, it's the opposite generally, that it is actually gay conversion therapy. Weirdly or not weirdly at all, the chemical affirmation model these self-same activists offer to fix the problem of being born in the wrong body is the same chemical castration that was used in failed efforts to convert homosexuals decades ago. Many pit parents intuit that their children are gay or lesbian or bisexual or simply gender nonconformists. Their success at preventing their LGB whatever children from desexing themselves demolishes the activists' pretension that trans identities are all naturally occurring phenomena or that parents do this out of hate. Sex mimics exist in nature, but they are not the opposite sex. Sex mimics are mimics. Science knew for decades that gender nonconformity in children is often linked with homosexuality as an adult, but then science pretended to forget it. Autism and other neurodivergences are common in parent stories about their children. So are abuse, early exposure to pornography, and actual grooming online. The trans kids phenomenon was never, ever really one monolithic thing. It was always a constellation of different issues swept up into a single discursive category so that the activists could claim their children's bodies for Moloch. But they will not surrender their children. Love is too strong for that. Stella O'Malley, a professional therapist who founded GenSpect with Lisa Marciano, found herself in tears the first time she listened to Terps. Their kids are certainly distressed, she writes in the foreword, but there are other challenges. Their neurodiversity or the trauma they have recently suffered have been overshadowed by gender issues, and this doesn't make sense to the parents. Many of these teens, this is another quote, many of these teens have repressed their sexuality. And plenty seem to be ignoring the fact that they are gay, lesbian or bisexual. Lots of them are deeply disappointed by the reality of life. These kids are loved and well cared for, but they believe the Disney films they grew up with and find the sharp shock of reality difficult to bear. I'd like to thank Matt Osborne for this excellent introduction to the book. There's much more to the article. I do urge you to go and read it. The link to the book is downstairs in the Dubras. Well done, Pet. Well done. Go buy it. I'll see you later.